Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're talking about the big retcon for the world of 40k and Dark Imperium, why the timeline shift was made, and the reasons why it could definitely be for the best. General spoiler warning to begin, as we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k lore, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, so for those that may not be aware, at the last Warhammer reveal, we received some rather big news during the author interview with Guy Haley regarding his Dark Imperium trilogy, and that was that the timeline was being officially moved from the end of the Indomitus Crusade right back into the heart of it. So now, it is just the end of the first phase. And not only that, Guy Haley has even reworked the first two novels, Dark Imperium and Dark Imperium Plague War. And honestly, my initial reaction was one of absolute dread. But having the news drop right before Blood Angels Week was probably a good thing, because as I was busy, it gave me time to digest it and truly think about the larger picture. I think, like many of you out there, I am very wary when it comes to retcons. It's one of my biggest fears as we near the climax of the Siege of Terror. Just what may get changed. So having a big change like this in the current lore was a big surprise. But when it comes particularly to the Dark Imperium novels being reworked, while I'm still a little apprehensive, as these two novels were nothing short of fantastic in my opinion, I am happy in the knowledge that nothing major is really being changed. In the words of the author Guy Haley himself, if you've read them before, the differences aren't massive. It's just a rephrasing of how far ahead it takes place, going from 100 years to just 12. So making sure I watched that interview and hearing that really quelled any big worries that I had. The insight into Guilliman in those novels, the growing presence of the Emperor, and the fantastic confrontation with Mortarion should hopefully all remain untouched. And hey, I'll have to read them anyway, so it will give us a good opportunity to go back and talk those events once more, which I haven't done since the real early days of the channel. But onto the larger picture. Why was it done? Well, the Indomitus Crusade was built to be the one last hope for the Imperium. With the fall of Cadia and the Great Rift tearing the galaxy asunder, the return of Guilliman and the unveiling of the Ultima Founding, it was essentially a 40k equivalent of the Great Crusade. If the Imperium was to survive, then it must go on the attack. And if there was one man to do it, then it was Rebute Guilliman. But then with the launch of the 8th edition and the Dark Imperium novel, you open the cover and oh, the Indomitus Crusade has essentially already happened. So it did feel even then that it was strange to have almost skipped by this major event. So taking us back and making it the focus again really does make sense. Now, I wasn't as big a fan of the Dawn of Fire Avenging Sun as I was the Dark Imperium series, but tying them closer together does again make a lot of sense, as they're essentially following the same storyline. So what are some of the best reasons for this in my opinion? Well, number one, it truly brings back the political intrigue. Guilliman returned to a vastly different Imperium to the one he left, and this was displayed nowhere better than upon the throne world itself, and in particular with the High Lords of Terror. Chris Wright has done an absolute stellar job with his Watchers of the Throne series, really showing us the extent of the turmoil going on within the heart of Terra itself. The jealousy and the power grabbing of the High Lords, and the very real fear of the threat Guilliman possesses. We spoke of the High Lord's intentions against Guilliman a few weeks ago, and we'll follow it up very soon, but spoiler warning, it gets a lot worse. So aligning this so it's going on in the present day makes the risk to Guilliman's power base and control all the more real. Guilliman is being forced to disband his unnumbered sons because it represents the threat of the legions of old. Make no mistake, Guilliman needs Terra. He who controls Terra controls the Imperium, Primarch or not. And the second reason, Chaos Ascendant. The whole point of the Indomitus Crusade in the first place was because Abaddon and Chaos were running rampant across the galaxy, and it was to take the fight to them instead, a sledgehammer to the mouth. But since Cadia fell, Abaddon was really MIA. Yes, we had Vigilus, but then nothing. No hints, no rumours, nothing. And bearing in mind Dark Imperium was set over a century later, that is a little odd considering Chaos was on the front foot, despite the outcome of Vigilus. Now of course we can't evolve the storyline too fast, or you quickly run out of a lifetime's worth of lore. But moving us back this century, it doesn't make Abaddon or any other big Chaos name feel like they've gone missing. We are right back in the heart of it, Guilliman racing to Ultramar to face Mortarion, as all the while the galaxy still trembles against Chaos. Reason 3. Dante and Imperium Nihilus. Now this is something I think a lot of people are forgetting. When we last saw Dante in Darkness in the Blood, he was assembling a fleet of his own across the Great Rift, the Fleet Nihilus. It makes a ton of more sense for this to be occurring during the Indomitus Crusade, rather than after it. The Fleet Nihilus is essentially the Blood Angels' own Indomitus Crusade, their form of vengeance against all who dare trespass into their Imperium, as Dante attempts to take the front foot himself, following Guilliman's lead. Now, while timelines for other novels aren't necessarily affected, it's safe to assume that with the Dark Imperium moving back, all other stories will be considered within the same setting, or at least previous to that, because nothing can be ahead of the main storyline. It just wouldn't make sense. And reason number 4, it brings back the feeling of momentum, of a galaxy truly at stake. The key to a successful storyline for GW, in my opinion at least, is to keep the feeling of the storyline moving. But the key here is without it having to take any major leaps forward. For it not to move, you risk the complaints of stagnancy, which many said before. But to keep moving forward too fast, you run out of room, and you end up boxing yourself into a corner, particularly with a pre-established background like 40k. That's why the Indomitus Crusade is perfect. The sense of momentum and threat truly returns. You can move through the phases, the war zones, all the while evolving the story, but not actually having to risk going too far, and ultimately having to perform another retcon. And regardless of Abaddon, it brings the actions of the other factions out there right into line with Guilliman's fight against Mortarion. Enemies such as the Silent King. The Necrons are moving against the Warp themselves, and while Guilliman fights in one war zone, he must depend on others to see the Imperium through. Guilliman's time just became all the more precious, let alone what other enemies we may see rise during the Crusade. Lorgar and Perturabo, I'm looking at you. So overall, as long as the main Guilliman details of Dark Imperium haven't changed, for me this change should really be a move in the right direction. As I said, I may not have been as big a fan of Avenging Sun as I was the Dark Imperium books, but it's just common sense to have all the stories interlinked much more closely. And I can't wait to see what happens in the third installment of Dark Imperium, Godblight. But as always guys, what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.